The last photograph of Lily Emerson was taken at 2:43 p.m. on June 9, 2007. She was wearing a pink sundress with yellow daisies, her black hair braided tightly on both sides of her face, and a chocolate smear at the corner of her mouth. Her arms were flung wide as she ran toward the carousel at Riverview Park, one of the most beloved landmarks in Cape Haven, Oregon. The picture, snapped by her best friend's mom during a birthday party, was never meant to become iconic. But after that moment, Lily was never seen again. The party had been loud and colorful, filled with balloons, cupcakes, and excited children chasing each other under the golden afternoon sun. Claire Emerson, Lily's mother, had stayed behind at work that day, her nurse shift overlapping with the party. She'd kissed her daughter goodbye that morning, handing over a carefully wrapped present and reminding her to say thank you afterward. It was supposed to be simple. It was supposed to be safe. By 4:10 p.m., panic had begun to ripple through the park. Lily had told one of the kids she needed to use the restroom and that she'd be right back. But when her absence stretched past 10 minutes, then 20, the adults began to search. Calls went out. The birthday decorations were forgotten. The carousel music played to an empty circle. The security team pulled up the footage from the park's surveillance cameras. The files had been wiped clean. Only one single frame remained. Lily turning her head, her face pale, eyes wide, as if startled by someone behind her. When Claire arrived at the park an hour later, the silence was louder than any siren. The police were already taping off the area. She dropped to her knees near the carousel, clutching the hem of Lily's cardigan someone had found near the bushes. It smelled like sugar and sunscreen. Detective Ray Castillo, a woman known for her calm demeanor, approached Claire with slow, deliberate steps. She had handled cases like this before. She hated them. The first 24 hours were crucial, and every minute already felt like a lifetime. Ray promised Claire they would find her daughter, but even she couldn't hide the concern in her voice. Flyers went up by nightfall. News vans parked outside the police station. That photograph of Lily, running with joy and innocence, flashed on every screen in the county. But there were no witnesses, no fingerprints, no screams. It was as if Lily had stepped out of her childhood and into a void. Over the next week, the search expanded beyond the park. Drones buzzed overhead, dogs sniffed the underbrush, volunteers in neon vests scoured trails and lakeshores. Every lead collapsed into nothing. A man in a green cap seen near the restrooms turned out to be a janitor with an alibi. A blue sedan speeding away was traced to a farm wagon late to workout. Each clue only deepened the void. On the 8th day, Claire found a hand-drawn card slipped under her apartment door. It was Lily's handwriting. The inside simply read, "Mom, he's watching. I'm scared." The ink was fresh. Claire didn't sleep for the next 3 days. She sat in Lily's room, surrounded by her favorite stuffed animals, staring at the unicorn stickers on the walls. Every sound outside made her jump. She stopped eating. Her shifts at the hospital were covered by coworkers who barely recognized her anymore. The town began to whisper. Parents held their children closer. The carousel was shut down indefinitely. And then the whispers became silence. The world kept spinning, as if it could forget Lily Emerson had ever existed. But Claire never did. She began collecting every scrap of information. She organized her own search parties, built maps on her walls, marked timelines and intersections. She kept a file on everyone who had been at the park that day, from parents to employees, and she wrote a letter to her daughter every single night. On the first anniversary of Lily's disappearance, Claire stood alone at Riverview Park. The grass had regrown. The carousel stood motionless, covered in a gray tarp. She placed a single pink daisy on the ground and whispered a promise to never stop looking. That night, another envelope arrived under her door. Inside was a single strand of black hair, tied with yellow thread. The second envelope arrived exactly 1 year later, slipped beneath the door without sound, as if the walls themselves were conspiring to remain silent. Claire had spent that entire day at the edge of the park again, standing beneath gray skies, holding Lily's photo like it might bring her daughter back through sheer force of memory. When she returned home, exhausted and hollowed, the white rectangle lay waiting on her doormat. Inside was another strand of black hair, tied with a thinner, nearly invisible red thread this time. No note, no smudge of ink, just the hair and the silence it carried. Claire didn't cry anymore. She just sat on the floor, legs folded, eyes blank, as if grief had calcified inside her. The first envelope had shaken her. This one solidified something crueler. Someone was watching. Someone knew. She had reported the first card to Detective Ray Castillo, who had taken it seriously but was limited by chain of custody and lack of witnesses. This second delivery meant the sender knew exactly where Claire lived, knew the anniversary of her child's vanishing, and, most chilling of all, they wanted to be remembered. The investigation remained technically open, but behind closed doors, Ray admitted they had no fresh leads. That reality dug deeper into Claire's ribs than any knife. She quit her job 6 months after the second envelope. She no longer had the bandwidth to smile at patients, to administer care with her daughter's laughter echoing in her head like a ghost. Her apartment became a headquarters. She bought pinboards, boxes of tacks, spools of red thread, and printed out every article ever written about Lily's case. She interviewed neighbors who had long since stopped answering the door for reporters. She rewatched the remaining CCTV frame until her eyes throbbed. Ray visited sometimes, offering whatever pieces she could legally share, but it was always the same. No new prints, no matching DNA, no credible witnesses. It was as if Lily had stepped into a black hole. Claire took to walking the edges of Riverview Park every morning before dawn, flat flower in one hand, her daughter's bracelet in the other. She memorized every trail, every dip in the ground, every tree root that jutted from the dirt. She began speaking to the trees, to the wind, to Lily, as if sound itself could pull her daughter back from wherever she'd been taken. Then, in the fall of 2009, a year and a half after Lily vanished, the town was rocked again. Mrs. Pauline DeWitt, a second-grade teacher and the woman who'd hosted the birthday party that day, failed to show up for work. Her house, a neatly trimmed craftsman-style home, was found empty. No signs of struggle, no signs of departure. Her car remained in the garage, her purse on the kitchen counter. Her dog had been left outside for hours. When police arrived, they found her cell phone open on the dining table with one outgoing call to an unknown number at 2:44 a.m. No voicemail, no trace. Claire didn't know whether to feel dread or vindication. Mrs. DeWitt had been on her interview list, but she had always refused to speak in detail about that day. She'd cried, yes, but never offered more than general sadness. Claire had always suspected she was hiding something, maybe not guilt, but fear. After DeWitt's disappearance, Ray dug deeper and found that the teacher had received several untraceable letters in the months leading up to her vanishing, all unsigned, each one containing a short sentence like, "You were smiling too much," or "Did you enjoy the carousel?" They'd never come to light during the original investigation. The files had been mistakenly stored in a mislabeled evidence box, Ray said. Her jaw clenched so tightly, Claire feared her teeth would crack. The media seized the new disappearance, calling it a curse, reviving the story of Lily with fresh fury. News vans returned. The carousel was shown again and again, as if its peeling paint held answers no one could hear. Claire refused interviews. She had grown weary of stories without action, of sympathy without justice. Then, 3 months later, something changed. While reviewing photos from that birthday party, ones she had collected from various parents over the past year, Claire noticed something odd in a group shot taken near the picnic area. In the far background, barely visible, was the shape of a man standing near the carousel. He wasn't a parent, he wasn't part of the staff, he wasn't in any of the other frames. His face was partially obscured by shadow, but he was staring directly at Lily. Claire brought the photo to Ray, who immediately sent it for digital enhancement. The result wasn't much clearer, but enough to confirm what Claire had feared. There was someone else there that day, someone no one had noticed. Claire took it further. She found a forum of amateur sleuths and posted the cropped image. Within a week, someone responded. A user from 2 towns over claimed they recognized the man. Said he looked like someone who used to live near Riverview and had worked maintenance at a private boarding school for a few months before vanishing from his post. His name, the user said, was Michael Arlen. Claire passed the information to Ray. They searched state records but found no official employee listing under that name at the school. However, a former janitor, checked, hired without background check, had worked there briefly and then left without warning after an incident involving a missing student's diary. The school had hushed it up. But Ray wasn't ready to let go. She brought in a forensic artist to reconstruct a composite sketch using the shadowed photo and the janitor's work ID, which one of the sleuths had uncovered from a scanned yearbook archive. The sketch was released statewide, no official matches. Still, Claire stared at it every night. Then, as the 3rd anniversary of Lily's disappearance approached, Claire's doorbell rang at 3:17 a.m. She opened it to find no one there, just a man in the advertisement settling on a road to a dim yellow moonlight. Inside were 2 things: a child's sock, pink with a unicorn embroidered on the side, and a Polaroid of what appeared to be a room with no windows, its walls covered in faded children's drawings. In the bottom right corner of the photo, a tiny name scribbled in crayon: Lily E. Claire dropped to the floor, the photo clenched in her trembling hands. The sock was Lily's. She remembered the pair vividly. She had bought them on a random Wednesday, a gift after Lily aced her spelling test. She had lost one the morning of the party. The room in the photo was unfamiliar, but something in the drawings, a heart, a rainbow, the same yellow sun Lily always added in her crayon art, felt heartbreakingly real. Ray came over within the hour. The photo was rushed to forensics, the sock tested, the DNA confirmed what Claire already knew in her bones. It was Lily's, and now they had proof. Someone had her, someone still did. The photo changed everything, but it also deepened the silence. After that night, the trail went cold again. Forensics confirmed the sock belonged to Lily, and analysts estimated the Polaroid was taken within the last 2 years, not recently. That meant someone had been holding onto the image before delivering it. Ray followed the chain of the envelope, examined the paper fibers, traced the ink on the name scribble, but all the technical scrutiny in the world couldn't pierce the fog of uncertainty surrounding the source. Claire, meanwhile, spiraled deeper into obsession. She cataloged the drawing styles in the photo, hoping to spot recurring themes, something, anything, that would tell her where the room was. She noticed a butterfly motif, a recurring symbol Lily used when she was younger. It had been the theme of her 7th birthday party. That detail, small as it was, made Claire believe the drawings weren't staged. They were real. They were hers. Still, the years stretched onward like a cruel joke. On each anniversary, the manila envelope returned. Each time it brought a new artifact: a torn piece of a coloring book, a small shoe covered in dust, once a button shaped like a strawberry that Claire remembered Lily pinning to her school bag. Whoever was sending these items had access to Lily or her belongings, but never gave more than fragments, never a location, never a voice. Claire tried responding, placing letters outside her apartment door or leaving notes in public places mentioned in the news coverage, but no answer ever came. By the 5th anniversary, the community had turned inward. The carousel was dismantled piece by piece after multiple vandalism incidents. The park was never officially closed, but few visited now. The laughter of children had been replaced with whispered stories and avoidance. Claire became a familiar figure, walking the perimeter, often muttering to herself, sometimes taking photos of seemingly random spots. She wore the same denim jacket every day, the one Lily once drew a smiley face on using a fabric marker. Ray was promoted to lead investigator in the department by then, but her desk remained cluttered with Lily's case file. Every so often, she revisited the sketch of the man in the background, now weathered at the corners from being handled so much. They'd put his face through every facial recognition database available. Still nothing. Claire's sister, Meredith, moved in temporarily after Claire had collapsed from exhaustion and dehydration during one of her midnight walks. She begged Claire to let go, just enough to breathe, to sleep, to feel. Claire didn't answer. She just pointed at her wall where dozens of pins connected articles, photos, delivery locations, and theories. She kept it lit all night, as if the glow itself might reveal a pattern. That same year, Claire started hearing about other disappearances. A boy gone missing from a fair 2 towns over. A girl who vanished during a school field trip. The details were eerily similar. Brief moment of separation, no witnesses, minimal physical evidence. Claire compiled those cases, found newspaper clippings, looked for patterns, timelines, shared geography. She mapped the locations and noticed they all formed a subtle arc curving through 3 counties, all within driving distance from Cape Haven. Ray looked into it too and agreed. There was something there, but there was still no proof linking them, no shared suspect, no shared vehicle sightings, just eerie repetition. Claire took this arc and plotted possible future targets, handing her predictions to local schools and event organizers under the guise of parental safety consulting. Most brushed her off politely. A few invited her to speak, but none took her seriously. She was the missing girl's mom, known for haunting parks and slipping flyers under windshields. Claire didn't mind the judgment. Her mission was never popularity. It was Lily. As the 10th year approached, Claire felt a shift. Her body aged beyond her years, her hands constantly trembled, and she had developed a chronic cough she couldn't afford to treat. She didn't tell Ray, didn't tell Meredith, but her sense of urgency grew. She started writing down everything she remembered about Lily, not just for herself, but for Lily, in case she returned and no one else remembered. She recorded her daughter's favorite bedtime story, the one about the blue bear in the mountain cave. She wrote down the melody of the lullaby she used to hum. She kept a tape recorder by her bed and spoke to it nightly, like a prayer. These recordings became her lifeline, her ritual. Then, a week before the 10th anniversary, Claire received a package instead of an envelope. It was bulkier, wrapped in thick paper, and had no return address. Inside was a child's. The cover was worn leather, the pages yellowed, the name Lily E. written in crooked black letters on the first page. The handwriting shifted from neat to shaky across the entries. Some pages were drawings, others were written entries about dreams, meals, moments. One entry read, "He gives me strawberry jam sometimes. I pretend to like it, so he stays now." The drawings showed a small room with no windows, a mattress on the floor, a door with no handle on the inside. In one sketch, a face watched through a vent. The journal ended with a page torn out. Claire clutched the book to her chest like it was her daughter's heartbeat. Ray came as soon as Claire called. The journal was examined, its paper dated, and confirmed consistent with the time frame of Lily's disappearance. Fingerprints were partial, inclusive. DNA on the torn binding matched Lily's hair samples. The jam samples remained between the pages, tested positive for traces of sedative compounds. This was no longer a question of possibility. Lily had been held, she had survived, and maybe, just maybe, she still was. The journal became a critical piece of evidence, reigniting the case, prompting renewed media attention and a re-examination of every cold lead in Claire's files. Investigators expanded their search to abandoned properties across the counties mapped in Claire's arc, but as always, the answer remained hidden. Claire, however, was no longer alone. Volunteers returned. Journalists approached her differently now. A young reporter named Jamie offered to digitize Lily's drawings, launching a website that compiled everything Claire had gathered. It went viral. People began sending in tips, memories, odd sightings. The silence that had ruled for nearly a decade began to crack. One submission stood out, a hiker who had found a hand-drawn card near the county border. It bore a crude rainbow and the words, "My name is Lily Emerson. I am here." Claire printed the message and taped it to her wall, directly beneath the earliest photo of her daughter. Her voice no longer shook when she said it. Lily was alive. She believed it now, with the certainty of breath. The journal electrified the investigation in a way that no prior clue ever had. With public interest now reignited and digital sleuths poring over the digitized pages, Claire and Detective Ray found themselves sifting through hundreds of tips each day. The website Jamie had launched became a national platform for sharing unsolved child abduction cases, and as more people contributed similar stories, a disturbing pattern began to crystallize. Several missing children, previously believed to be isolated cases, showed nearly identical hallmarks: brief disappearances during public outings, the presence of vague witness descriptions about a quiet man loitering nearby, and, in a few rare instances, similar follow-up items sent to the parents years later. Ray started cataloging these connections on a new board in the precinct, slowly filling it with photos, maps, and numbers. Claire's map became more accurate by the day. Every pin represented more than a case. It was a life, a wound, an unfinished chapter in someone's story. In the center of it all remained Lily. One night, Claire received a message on the forum tied to Jamie's site. It came from a user named HollowSky19. The message simply read, "She's not the only one. I was there too." The name caught Claire's breath. It was vague, possibly a hoax, but it carried a strange weight. She shared it with Ray, who immediately requested a digital trace. The IP was masked, routed through several international servers. Still, the message offered something the other tips didn't. An insider perspective, a memory. Ray posted a follow-up through the site, worded carefully, asking the user to describe what they remembered. 3 days passed in silence. Then a second message arrived. "There were 6 of us, not at once. Sometimes they moved us. I remember a girl with braids. She had a scar on her chin. She hummed a song about stars." And the star song, Claire had made it up when Lily was a toddler, a lullaby only they shared. She immediately replied, offering her phone number and pleading for a call. Ray monitored the site but advised caution. If this was real, it could be their first direct contact with someone tied to the captor. If it was a trap, Claire needed protection. That night, Claire received a call from an unknown number. A young man's voice trembled through the static. He wouldn't give his name. He wouldn't say where he was, but he described in painstaking detail the interior of the room shown in Lily's Polaroid, the scratch on the floor tiles, the uneven plaster, the smell of mold, and something else, something like burnt sugar. He said he had escaped 3 years ago, but never went to the police, out of fear. They had told him no one would believe him, that the world outside wouldn't want him anymore. Ray listened to the recording and cross-referenced his descriptions with locations already searched. 2 stood out: abandoned youth centers converted into storage sites. Within 48 hours, a multi-agency team descended on the first site. They found old sleeping mats, remnants of food packaging, chains bolted into the floor beneath a rug. No people. But DNA testing later confirmed that at least one of the samples matched Lily's. It was old, likely from years prior, but it was hers. At the second location, things escalated. The team found hidden compartments in the walls, a narrow tunnel leading to what looked like a makeshift observation room with broken cameras and a filing cabinet containing unmarked VHS tapes. No recordings could be played immediately. Most had degraded, but tech specialists began the slow process of recovery. It was clear now this was no single act. This was a system, or a methodical operation run by people who had planned, built, maintained, and then abandoned their sites as soon as heat approached. For Claire, the horror came not from the growing size of the operation, but from the realization that Lily had likely been moved many times, each one further from the child she had once known. Still, she clung to the belief that her daughter, wherever she was, remained alive, not untouched, not unbroken, but breathing. Somewhere, HollowSky19 sent one final message, a location, coordinates in the woods south of Millstone County, an area known for illegal dumping and difficult terrain. Ray wanted to approach with caution. Claire insisted she be present. After much debate, she was allowed to join, under supervision. The search team arrived at dawn. Mist rolled over the soil like breath. They hiked nearly 2 miles before they found it, a cabinet camouflaged by ivy and forest debris, its windows boarded, just it shut. They breached it slowly. Inside, the air was heavy with rot and silence. There was a cot, blankets, a water jug half full, and taped to the inside wall, a drawing. They hired the half-hunk of birth to it, and a woman with wings, a rainbow above their heads. It was Lily's style, unmistakably hers. Claire pressed her hand against the image, tears falling without sound. They searched the area for hours, but found no person. The site had been recently vacated. Whoever had been there had left in a hurry. On a dusty shelf near the door, someone had etched a name in the wood. Lily. Beneath it, one word, soon. The find sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. News outlets san the story non-stop. The theory that a regional child trafficking ring had operated undetected for years became national conversation. Claire was offered interviews, book deals, advocacy roles. She declined them all. Her focus remained singular, Lily. But now, with the public aware and the pressure on law enforcement at its highest, more people came forward, survivors, families, witnesses who had kept quiet out of fear or shame. The silence cracked wide open. Ray, now leading a task force in conjunction with federal agents, began coordinating efforts to locate all known properties associated with the pattern. The ring was real, its end had begun, and through it all, Claire stood with her daughter's drawing in hand, more determined than ever. The carved message in the abandoned cabin sparked a level of urgency Claire had not seen in years. With federal resources now fully committed and public attention magnifying every detail, the investigation surged into overdrive. Detective Ray, promoted again to lead the multi-jurisdictional task force, coordinated with cyber forensic teams, behavioral analysts, and special victims units from across the country. They began identifying key locations and narrowing the scope of the trafficking ring's reach. The VHS tapes recovered from the youth center after delicate restoration revealed a disturbing montage of surveillance footage from inside various containment rooms. The faces of children appeared one after another, never speaking, often drawing or staring blankly into corners. Some rooms had speakers, distorted adult voices gave orders or threats. No faces of the perpetrators were visible, but the voices were consistent across several tapes. 2 male, 1 female. Analysts isolated background sounds, the screech of birds native to very specific regions. These environmental cues allowed the team to begin cross-referencing sites. They finally located one active signal source, a faint live feed buried in an old surveillance relay, pinging intermittently from a relay station decommissioned years ago. Ray assembled a team within hours and secured a warrant to sweep the location. Claire was not allowed on this raid, much to her frustration. She waited in the task force trailer, surrounded by Lily's drawings, listening to the radio chatter in a haze of hope and dread. The location turned out to be a transit hub for the ring, not a detention site. There were signs of recent use: food wrappers, a sleeping bag, a medical kit with antiseptics, and several vials of sedatives matching those found in Lily's journal. But the site was empty. One crucial item recovered was a digital camera containing images taken over the last few months. Photos of wooded areas, cabins, inside views of holding rooms, and finally, a blurred picture of a girl on a bed, partially obscured by shadow. Facial recognition could not confirm her identity, but Claire recognized the shape of her daughter's cheek, the angle of her hand, the bracelets. It was her. This confirmed Lily was still alive and being moved. The next breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A retired train engineer named Walter Kellman contacted Ray after seeing footage of the tapes on the news. He recognized a sound, an antique mechanical whirring in the background of one tape. He said only a few trains in operation still used that outdated hydraulic brake system, and only one maintenance company serviced them, a small contractor in Juniper Valley, a town 50 miles away. Ray sent an undercover team. What they found was a warehouse camouflaged as a tire recycling facility. Inside were records, shipment logs, personnel entries, repair orders. Most were mundane, but buried in a stack of repair receipts was a name that triggered alarms. Marcus Dwell. He had worked in transit logistics for decades and had been quietly dismissed from 3 prior jobs after anonymous complaints about his behavior around children. None had led to criminal charges. Claire remembered the name from a neighbor who once mentioned a distant cousin in shipping who acted oddly. Ray pulled Marcus's background. He had no immediate family, lived off-grid in a trailer deep in the Pine Hollow area. The task force secured surveillance, and within 2 days they had visual confirmation of his presence. More importantly, a woman was seen exiting the trailer briefly, a teenager with braided hair, slight limp, wearing oversized clothes. The team planned the raid meticulously. Claire watched the operation unfold from a distance, her hands trembling. They moved in just before dawn. The woman, clearly frightened, bolted into the woods, but was quickly intercepted by agents who spoke gently, coaxing her into safety. Marcus was arrested without resistance, though he maintained a blank stare throughout the process. Inside the trailer, agents found dozens of personal belongings: shoelaces, buttons, childlike drawings, old journals. They were souvenirs. Trophy. In a locked freezer chest was a stack of labeled envelopes containing hair, fingernail clippings, and fabric swatches. Claire wept silently as each item was photographed and catalogued. In the back room, hidden behind a sliding wall panel, was a smaller compartment. Inside was a cot, a plastic chair, a night light shaped like a moon, and beneath the floorboards, carefully wrapped in a cloth, they found Lily's watch. It had stopped at 2:17. Claire collapsed when Ray placed it in her hand. The girl retrieved during the raid was not Lily. Her name was Kayla. She had been missing for almost 4 years. She was malnourished, traumatized, but alive. She clung to Claire at the hospital, whispering fragments of memories. A room with blue walls, a woman who sang lullabies, a name she could taken care of her when she arrived, helped her hide food, told her how to pretend to sleep. But Lily had been moved before her. Kayla remembered a van with a dented bumper, a man with a burn scar on his wrist, and a woman who smelled like mint gum and cigarettes. With Kayla's help, the task force was able to identify the next destination. The details pointed to a farmhouse located 90 miles east, recently purchased under a shell company linked to Marcus. Ray coordinated the approach quietly, knowing this could be their only chance. Claire wasn't told until the team was en route. She sat by her window that night, holding the watch, praying that if Lily were in that farmhouse, she'd hear them coming. The farmhouse was surrounded just after midnight. Agents moved in silence. They breached the basement first. There, among piles of children's shoes and torn books, was a locked cell door. The key was found hidden behind a false panel in the kitchen wall. When they opened it, what they saw would haunt them forever. The farmhouse stood like a sentinel in the dark, its chipped paint and sagging roof masked by the early spring fog. It was the kind of place easily overlooked, buried off a dirt road with no mailbox, no signs of life, but inside, past the creaking porch and bolted front door, camouflaged by a faded area rug, was a narrow stairwell descending into silence. The task force entered in tactical formation, led by Ray, their movements silent and swift, hearts pounding with anticipation. In the basement, the air was still and thick, heavy with mildew and dust. Against the back wall, obscured by discarded boxes and a rusted water heater, they found a reinforced steel door. Its surface was scratched, dented from the inside. Ray's gloved hands felt along the seams. There was no external lock, just a code panel with faded buttons, the kind used in secure warehouses. Kayla's memory surfaced again. The numbers. She remembered Lily whispering them to her as a bedtime rhyme. Ray entered the sequence slowly. 4219. The panel blinked red, then green. The door clicked, and then it opened. Inside, they found a room no larger than a garden shed. A single light bulb swung above to a cross-creek floor. On the bed sat a girl. Her hair was longer now, tangled, streaked with gray despite her age. Her eyes blinked against the light, too wide, too quiet. She didn't move, not at first. Ray stepped forward carefully. The girl's fingers curled around something in her lap. It was a stuffed animal, nearly unrecognizable from where, but Claire would have known it instantly. "Mr. Peebles, Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit." Ray spoke softly, called her name, and finally the girl raised her eyes. She didn't speak, she just stared. It wasn't until one of the medics approached with a blanket that she whispered one word: "Mom." Back at the task force trailer, Claire had been pacing for hours, unable to sleep, unable to sit still. She had lived a decade in the dark, and now, in this one moment, everything balanced on a breath. The radio crackled. Ray's voice came through, breaking but clear. "We found her." Claire collapsed into her chair, sobbing, the watch still in her hand. Time had broken long ago, but now it finally moved again. The reunion wasn't what the movies promised. There was no sprint across the field, no tearful embrace at the doorstep. Lily was airlifted to a private facility under federal protection, her identity confirmed through medical records and DNA. Claire was brought in only after doctors stabilized her condition. She walked into the quiet hospital room with trembling steps. Lily lay in a bed too big for her small frame, wrapped in warm blankets, her eyes open but unfocused. Claire sat beside her and waited. No questions, no expectations, just presence. It took 2 hours before Lily turned her head. One hand rose from beneath the covers, reaching blindly, searching. Claire took it in both of hers. It was smaller than she remembered, colder, but alive. For the first time in 10 years, she allowed herself to believe in that word again. Alive. Lily's recovery was a slow, fractured journey. She didn't speak at first, only nodded or shook her head. The doctors said her trauma responses were deep-rooted. She had been conditioned to fear speech, punished for sound, trained to stay silent. Claire never pushed. She brought coloring books, soft music, familiar scents from home. One afternoon, Ray visited with a surprise, a recording of Kayla recounting one of the stories Lily had told her in captivity. The blue bear and the mountain cave. Lila listened, blinked, and then whispered, "That's mine." It was the first full sentence she had spoken. The breakthrough opened something. Lily began to speak in fragments, mostly about memories, some vivid, others warped by time and fear. She talked about the rooms, the people who came and went, the moments of light in an otherwise dark existence. She remembered helping younger children hide, remembered drawing rainbows and butterflies on the walls when she thought she would never leave. She described the man with the burn on his wrist. Benji, he called himself. And a woman who brought soup in paper cups but never looked anyone in the eye. The descriptions matched 2 suspects already in custody. Claire took every detail to Ray, who matched them with evidence collected from previous raids. The network was unraveling. More survivors were identified, more connections drawn. Each piece of Lily's story became another stone in the foundation of a case that would reshape close. She never left the hospital for more than a few hours. She slept in a chair by Lily's bed, holding her daughter's hand through the night. One morning, Lily asked her something that made her heart stop. "Did I forget how to be me?" Claire didn't know how to answer, so she just hugged her and whispered, "You're finding her every day." Lily's memories did not return in a stream, but in drips, unpredictable, jarring, and sometimes so vivid they left her shaking. The hospital room became her sanctuary, a place of whispered truths and cautious light. Claire stayed by her side day after day, with Ray frequently visiting, always with a new file, a new photo, a quiet question phrased as gently as possible. It began with colors. Lily would point to a paint swatch or a scarf and say, "That was the hallway." Or that color was on the ceiling where they made us sleep. Then came the names. Not full names, never that, but fragments. Miss Cora with the red hair, who never spoke above a whisper. Jakey, who cried every night until he was gone. Then one evening, as a summer rain tapped gently on the hospital windows, Lily said something that made Claire drop the cup in her hand. "I saw a boy in a blue jacket. He knew my name. He wasn't supposed to." That detail unlocked something critical. The task force had long suspected that children were sometimes held in overlapping locations but lacked hard proof. Ray pulled case files on missing boys who vanished within the same time frame. A name popped out. Logan DeVries. He had vanished from a county fair 3 states away, 2 years after Lily's abduction. His parents had never stopped searching. When they saw Lily's photo on the news, they had called, but Lily's condition made verification impossible at the time. Now they had something. A link. Ray arranged for Lily to look through a photo lineup of other children, carefully curated with no identifiers, just faces, scanned in grayscale to minimize emotional overload. Lily's hand hovered over one. "Him, that's Logan. He was older than me, but he shared food. She said he was there for months and then was gone." Ray reached out to Logan's family and reopened the cold case, with Lily's testimony as the cornerstone. A new search was conducted in an abandoned orchard Lily mentioned, a place she described in eerie, perfect detail. Broken glass in the windows, birds nesting in the rafters, a hidden hatch beneath the floorboards. The orchard was real, part of a failed farm co-op owned briefly by a shell corporation linked to Marcus Dwell. Under the hatch, forensic teams found remains, clothing, small bones, a pendant that Logan's mother confirmed belonged to her son. The discovery sent waves of grief and validation through both families. For the first time, Logan's parents had answers. Lily cried for the first time in front of someone other than Claire. She sobbed quietly, her head against her mother's shoulder, whispering apologies. She thought if she remembered sooner, maybe they could have saved him. Claire held her, rocked her like she was still 6, and told her over and over it wasn't her fault. She survived. That was enough. That was everything. The media swarmed again, the story evolving from rescue to reckoning. Survivors stepped forward, emboldened by Lily's courage. People once too afraid to speak now told their stories. With each account, the pattern grew clearer. The ring had operated in cells scattered across rural and overlooked corners, each connected by a quiet infrastructure, transit companies, abandoned properties, complicit caretakers. Claire and Lily became symbols not just of survival, but of the fight for systemic change. Still, with the spotlight came risk. Lily's face, her name, her story. It was everywhere. Claire worried constantly about the psychological toll. Therapists were brought in, specialists in trauma and reintegration. They helped Lily create routines, boundaries, safe spaces. She learned to express fear, to say no, to sleep with the door open or closed as she needed. She asked to visit their old home one day. Claire hesitated, but agreed. They returned together, slow and quiet. Lily walked through the hallway like it was a dream, touching walls, smelling the familiar soap from the bathroom, stopping at her bedroom door. Everything was how Claire had left it. The bed, the photos, the glow-in-the-dark stars still clinging to the ceiling. Lily climbed onto the mattress and curled into the same corner where she used to read. She whispered, "I thought I made this up. I thought I dreamed this place." Claire knelt beside her and said, "No, baby. This was always real. You are real. And you're home." The return to their neighborhood was met with cautious joy. Neighbors left cards, flowers, casseroles on their porch. The police stationed a car nearby for protection, just in case. The media parked across the street for weeks. Claire asked them to leave. Some did, some didn't. Ray visited almost daily. She brought updates, reports of new raids, new rescues. The ring was collapsing. Arrests were being made across state lines. One day she brought news that a high-ranking organizer had been apprehended in Nevada. He had a ledger. Inside were dates, names, locations. One of those locations matched the orchard, another matched the farmhouse, a third was in Louisiana. Ray planned to pursue it, but not without Lily's input. Lily had begun journaling, pages and pages of dreams, memories, moments. Some good, most not, but in the stack was a drawing, a map of a place she hadn't spoken of yet, a swampy patch of woods, a bridge, a shack on stilts. She said they took her there once for what they called rotation. The word chilled Claire. Ray's eyes narrowed. That third location, it was near the Atchafalaya Basin. She made plans immediately. They would search the area. Lily asked if she could help. Claire said no. Ray said maybe. For the first time since her return, Lily raised her voice. "I need to see it. I need to know it's gone." The air in Louisiana wrapped around them like a thick, invisible blanket, humid and unrelenting even in early morning. Ray had coordinated with local authorities to clear access to the property near Atchafalaya Basin, a dense, waterlogged stretch of land mostly forgotten by maps and rarely visited by anything but wildlife and runoff from industrial canals. The area had once been the site of a hunting cabin, later converted into what property records vaguely labeled as a remote lodging facility. It had been purchased in cash under another shell company, the kind Marcus Dwell and his ring had used across the country. This one, however, had signs of recent youth. Unlike the orchard and the farmhouse, this place was not abandoned, just hidden. When Ray and her team approached, they brought boats instead of trucks. The land around the structure was impassable by foot, thick with reeds, insects, and the murky depth of slow-moving swamp water. The cabin itself sat on stilts, gray from weather, its windows boarded, its reflection broken in the black mirror of the swamp. Lily had not traveled with them, but her map had been detailed. The twisted cypress roots, the plank footbridge, even the carving on the half-submerged log, each matched her drawing precisely. As they docked, Ray's hand hovered near her holster. She had walked into darkness before, but this felt different. heavy, like the air itself remembered what had happened here. Inside, the stillness told its own story. The interior of the cabin reeked of mold and chemicals. The front room was sparse, just a metal folding chair, a cot, and a small table littered with empty vials and surgical gloves. On the walls were hooks, still holding tattered clothing. A camera on a tripod stood in the corner, pointed toward the cot. Ray's team began a sweep, checking every surface, photographing everything. The back room had no windows, only checking every surface, photographing everything. The back room had no windows too high to pass through. On the floor was a steel drain, stained and rusting. Next to it was a plastic bin filled with medical supplies, bandages, sedatives, antiseptics. Most chilling was a narrow drawer built into the wall, disguised by paneling. Inside, the team found dozens of envelopes, each marked with numbers and short codes. Many contained hair, fragments of cloth, and in one, Ray stepped outside, her breath sharp and quick. This was not just a holding site, this had been a place of harm, a place of endings. Forensics confirmed multiple DNA profiles, all female, all under 16. One matched a girl missing from Texas, another from Mississippi. But no match for Lily, confirming what Ray suspected. Lily had passed through here, but not stayed long. Her testimony was beginning to align with the evidence. This cabin had been a pit stop, a distribution point. The traffickers moved their victims here for sorting, as horrible as that word sounded, before dispersing them across a network now sprawling wider than anyone had imagined. Ray called Claire the next morning. She chose her words carefully, knowing the weight each syllable carried. The sight confirmed Lily's memory, but it also confirmed just how vast and methodical the ring had been. Claire listened in silence, her hand covering her mouth, her eyes wet but dry of tears. She hadn't cried since Lily came home, not properly. There was something in her that refused to fall apart again, a sense that doing so might break the fragile thread of their reunion. Ray didn't push. She just said they were building something now, something prosecutable, and Lily's drawings, memories, and courage were the cornerstone. Claire shared the update with Lily that night. Her daughter listened, expression unreadable. Then she stood and walked to the kitchen, where she pulled out her journal, 3 of them now, filled cover to cover. She opened to a page in the middle. This was the place they called the end of the road. They only brought us there if they were deciding. Claire's hands trembled as she turned the page. The drawing showed 2 doors, one marked with a red handprint, the other left. Ray had seen this symbol before. In the drawer beneath the steel drain, one envelope was marked with a red palm smear. Lily tapped the drawing and said, "They never let you come back through the red door. That's where they took Amelia." Claire didn't know who Amelia was, but Ray did. Amelia Sanborn had disappeared 7 years earlier. She was believed to have run away from her foster home, and no one had pursued her case aggressively. She became a statistic, lost in the system. Lily's memory gave Ray the push she needed to reclassify Amelia's case and tie it directly into the trafficking investigation. She filed a request for federal designation, Organized Trafficking Enterprise. With that label, they could access broader databases, interagency support, and expanded jurisdiction. The net began tightening. More arrests followed. Former janitors, security guards, even a pediatric nurse, all linked by evidence recovered from the Louisiana site. Each name brought more horror, but each arrest brought hope. Claire and Lily watched it unfold from the quiet of their small home. News anchors called Lily a survivor. Advocates called her a miracle. But Claire knew better. Lily was not just a miracle. She was a mirror reflecting everything the world had refused to see for far too long. One night, Claire found Lily on the porch, staring at the stars. She sat beside her daughter and waited. After a long pause, Lily spoke. "I don't want to be the girl who found the others." Claire reached over and held her hand. "Then we'll help you do that. Together." The courthouse in Albany had never hosted a case like this. Federal marshals secured the perimeter, media vans lined the surrounding blocks, and inside, 3 separate courtrooms were wired to live-stream proceedings to law enforcement agencies and victim advocacy groups across the country. The case against Marcus Dwell and his affiliates was unprecedented not just in scale, but in complexity. Over 24 defendants had been charged, each connected through digital trails, financial records, and survivor testimony that pieced together a decades-long web of child trafficking and abuse. At the center of it all was Lily's story. Her journals were submitted as evidence. Her drawings were presented. Her whispered recollections, recorded during therapy sessions, played behind closed doors for jurors who listened through headphones, silent but shaken. Claire sat through every day of the trial. She took notes in the same notebook she had once used to track search efforts, turning pain into purpose. Ray, now officially leading the multi-agency task force, testified for 6 hours, detailing the forensic links, the recovered locations, the methods used to evade detection. But it was Lily's courage that made headlines. She took the stand, not as a witness, but as a force. She read a prepared statement, hands shaking but voice clear. She said she remembered everything. She remembered being taken, being moved, being silenced. But more than anything, she remembered the ones who didn't make it home. Her words broke the courtroom's composure. Reporters cried. Jurors looked away. And Marcus Dwell stared at the floor, for once without word. Outside the courthouse, vigils were held nightly. Names of the missing were read aloud by volunteers, lit candles forming the shape of a heart across the lawn. Claire and Lily attended one anonymously, standing in the shadows just behind the press line. As the names echoed into the night air, Lily whispered, Amelia. Then Jakey. Then Logan. One by one, the people she had known in the dark, the ones who had fed her scraps or given her warmth or simply not screamed. Each name was a thread in the tapestry of her past, and she was determined to remember them all. Meanwhile, in court, a piece of evidence stunned even the prosecution. Hidden in one of the recovered flash drives was a series of video files labeled in code. When decrypted, they revealed surveillance footage from inside the Louisiana cabin and other locations. The footage showed what Lily had described in drawings, trafficked children being sorted, labeled, documented. Some tapes included faces now linked to active cases. Others, heartbreakingly, showed children still unidentified. The courtroom was cleared when the tapes were shown. Only the jury, attorneys, and law enforcement were allowed inside. Even Ray stepped out, the images too much after years in the field. But from those recordings, 3 more survivors were identified. Their families were contacted, reunions quietly arranged. Lily, when told, asked for their names. She wanted to send letters. She wanted them to know someone remembered them, even in the dark. The defense tried to argue duress, manipulation, even mistaken identity. But the evidence was too overwhelming. Financial records showed payments routed through shell companies. GPS data placed defendants near known crime scenes, and the testimony pingingly consistent, anchoring human. Crushed any hope of explanatory. On all counts, human trafficking, conspiracy, sexual exploitation of minors. Life sentences, without parole, for Dwell, for his lieutenants, for the complicit caregivers and silent enablers. The sentence felt heavy, but not enough. For the families who never got to hold their children again, no judgment could restore what was lost. But it was a step, a stone laid in the path forward. After the trial, Ray stood on the courthouse steps beside Claire and Lily. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, but they said nothing. Instead, Ray handed Claire a folder. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written by other survivors, families, advocates. They thanked Lily. They called her the reason they believed. One note simply said, "Because of you, I was found." Claire and Lily returned home to a quiet street that no longer felt like a trap. Neighbors had tied ribbons around mailboxes. Flowers bloomed on their porch. Inside the house was the same, but different. The silence was no longer empty. It was peaceful. Healing, Lily began speaking at small gatherings, schools, libraries, church groups. Her voice still trembled, but her message never did. She spoke of resilience, of warning signs, of the importance of listening when a child says they're scared. Claire supported her, always nearby but never overbearing. She had learned that healing was not a straight line, but a spiral. Returning, revisiting, repeating, and slowly rising. Ray remained a constant presence, not just as an agent, but as a friend. She and Lily developed their own shorthand, a language of glances and nods. One night over dinner, Ray asked Lily if she ever wanted to stop telling her story. Lily thought for a long time, then said, only when they all stop forgetting. The case changed the law. Congress passed new legislation expanding resources for missing children investigations. The Mason Act, named for a boy whose watch was once found under a floorboard, became law. Claire wept when she heard. So did Lily. Mason had been her friend, her protector. His memory now protected others. The house was quiet again, but now it was the kind of quiet that felt earned. It had been months since the trial, since Lily stood before a courtroom full of strangers and told the world what had happened to her and to the others. She had grown in the silence since then, not taller in inches, but in presence. Her words no longer cracked when she told her story. Her voice no longer quivered when she named the places. She had begun to call them by name, the orchard, the farmhouse, the bridge and the swamp, not just to remember them, but to take away their power. What once were nightmares were now just names on a map, red X's on paper. She could fold the map and put it in a drawer when she was done. Claire watched her daughter change, slowly, deliberately. She saw how Lily still flinched at unexpected knocks, still triple-checked locks before bed, still woke sometimes in a cold sweat. But she also saw how Lily now answered the door herself, how she started locking it just once, how she started to keep a neat clutter beside her trauma log. Progress was not a straight line, but it was real. Claire found herself breathing easier, though the grief never left. It simply curled up in a quieter corner of her chest. They had survived. That was no small thing. Ray came by on a Tuesday with a folder full of forms and a cup of coffee with too much sugar, just how Lily liked it. The forms were for a foundation. Claire had mentioned the idea in passing months earlier. A place for the lost, a place for the returned, a center for families navigating the liminal space between grief and hope. The name came from Lily herself, the Red Door Foundation. When Ray asked her why, Lily had smiled faintly and said, because that was supposed to be the end. Now it's the beginning. They launched it on a rainy spring afternoon in the community hall where Lily had once hidden from reporters. It was standing room only. Survivors spoke, parents spoke, therapists, detectives, lawyers, caseworkers, all gathered under one roof to commit to never forgetting. Lily gave the keynote. She stood behind the podium, glanced down at her notes, and then pushed them aside. She didn't need them. She talked about the first time she was taken, the colors she remembered, the small kindnesses that kept her alive. She talked about the people who believed her when she wasn't sure she believed herself. And she talked about the future, about building something from the ashes. The crowd stood as she finished. Some cried, some clapped. All understood that they were in the presence of something rare. Not a miracle, but a monument to resilience. As the foundation took shape, donations poured in. Volunteers offered services. Survivors reached out in waves, some ready to speak, others simply needing a place to be heard. The Red Door Foundation became more than an office. It became a movement. Claire took charge of family support services. Ray headed up survivor outreach. Lily, when she wasn't in school, helped with logistics, trainings, and sometimes just sat in the break room with other kids who had stories like hers. She didn't always talk. Sometimes her presence was enough. They saw her and understood that healing wasn't always about answers. Sometimes it was about acknowledgement. A year after the launch, Lily was invited to Washington to speak before Congress. She wore a simple dress and carried a single photograph in her pocket, one taken before she was taken, of her and Mason grinning under a blanket fort. It was about time, about people, about choosing to act before another child vanished. She read names into the record. She made them stay in the air just long enough to feel real. When she finished, the chamber was silent, and then it erupted in applause. In the quiet after the storm, Claire and Lily returned home to a new kind of normal. They planted flowers in the backyard. They got a dog, a rescue, blind in one eye, but full of warmth. Lily named him Shadow because he followed her everywhere but never got in her way. She began writing, not just journals, but stories, fiction, poetry, essays about survival. She entered a national contest with a piece called The Girl with Door. It won. She was published. She didn't use her full name, just Lily. That was enough. Claire read the piece one evening by the fireplace. She cried through most of it. Not because it was sad, but because it was hers. Their story, not erased, just retold. Lily watched her and said softly, "I don't want to be famous, you know. I just want to be useful." Claire nodded. "You already are, more than you know." On the second anniversary of her return, the town held a small ceremony. Not a parade, not a spectacle, just a gathering in the park with music, candles, and laughter. They released lanterns into the sky, each one bearing the name of a child still missing. Lily stood with Claire, holding her lantern, whispering the names as they floated upward. Amelia, Jakey, Logan. Mason, when hers rose, she reached out and held Claire. It was warm, steady. They watched the sky together, a sky that once seemed unreachable, now filled with light. Later that night, back home, Lily curled up in bed and pulled the covers tight. Shadow jumped up beside her. She turned off the lamp. In the dark, she wasn't afraid. She knew what it held. She had walked through it and come out the other side, and tomorrow she'd open the foundation doors again. She'd meet someone else, hear another story, and slowly, gently, help carry it into the light. If this story moved you even a little, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next mystery we uncover together. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of Lily's journey struck you the most? Which twist caught you off guard? And, if you were in Claire's shoes, what would you have done differently? Let me know in the comments below.